Hello, everyone, and good afternoon. I cannot think of a better way to go into the weekend. I always feel like Thursday is one day until the weekend, right? I feel that way because that's true. But also it just really helps me. So I am super excited that we get to spend what would be, if you're in the Midwest, on everyone's traditional lunch hour with two incredible authors today. We will also keep this event up. So if you're not able to catch us during the day, you can rewatch it this evening. And I highly recommend that the Novel Neighbor Book Club consider listening to this event or bookmarking it to come back to. Hint, hint to future book club choices. So all of that to say, I could not be more excited. I'm Stephanie. I'm with the Novel Neighbor. We are a woman-owned and operated independent bookstore that's located in St. Louis, Missouri. And we have two incredible authors joining us today. The first author is Megan Collins, the author of The Family Plot, Behind the Red Door, and The Winter Sister, definitely some of our staff favorites. She has taught creative writing for many years at both the high school and college level and is the managing editor of 3 Elements Literary Review. She lives in Connecticut. And Megan is helping us talk today to Janice Hallett. Janice is the author of The Appeal, which just hit U.S. shelves this past Tuesday and is one of our most look forward to books of 2022. Some of us were lucky enough to read a copy early from the UK, and it became quickly everyone's biggest obsession on staff. So we have been really looking forward to this event. Janice is a former magazine editor, award-winning journalist, and government communications writer. She wrote articles and speeches for, among others, the Cabinet Office, Home Office, and Department for International Development. Her enthusiasm for travel has taken her around the world several times, from Madagascar to the Galapagos, Guatemala to Zimbabwe, Japan, Russia, and South Korea. A playwright and screenwriter, she penned the feminist Shakespearean stage comedy Netherbard and co-wrote the feature film Retreat. The Appeal is her first novel. Janice and Megan, thank you so much for being here today. It's so great to have you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very good to be here.
Yeah. All right. Well, I already said this to you while we were kind of backstage, but I just want everybody to know how excited I am to be able to talk to you about The Appeal. I got to read it several months ago, and I could not put it down. And I was a little like, at first I was like, am I going to be into the style of this book? Is this going to work for me? And yes, it definitely immediately worked for me. And I just like could not stop turning the pages. And as a writer, I have so many questions about kind of the process of creating this book, but as a reader as well, who just really enjoyed it. And so I'm so excited to dive into all that. And I thought we should start, though, first with maybe you can tell everybody who doesn't know about the book, what it's about, and sort of the way it's structured and all that.
Sure. The Appeal is told via emails and texts and messages. And you don't get very much else. You get a few transcriptions of interviews a bit later on, but mostly you're reading people's emails with this. So the narrative arc is a little bit different. The narrative is unfolds in a slightly different way. But it tells the story of a small town drama group and the hierarchy within it. And within that hierarchy, you've got newcomers, Sam and Kel, who've been volunteering overseas for many years, and they're kind of forced back to this community for reasons we discover a bit later on. And you've also got the Haywards, the alpha family, who everyone loves. They're leading lights of the drama group, and everyone's known them for years. A lot of the members are family, they're certainly close friends or employees. So it's a very tight-knit community. And shortly after the novel starts, we read about their granddaughter who's been diagnosed with a brain cancer. And they want to raise money for drug treatment from overseas for her. So hence the appeal is launched, an appeal to raise money for funds. Now, something has gone wrong with this because the whole bunch of emails is being read by 2 law students who have been tasked by their tutor to look at all these documents and work out what's gone wrong, what's happened. And that's all for an appeal case. So the term appeal has more than one meaning here. I don't think I've missed anything out there or given anything away.
No, that sounds perfect. Yeah, and I loved the way that those text messages between the two lawyers who were looking at it. I loved how that functioned in the book because it gave us a chance to kind of catch our breath with all of the information we're taking in and to process it with them and say, okay, I think this person is kind of shady. I think this is weird, because they're feeling those things too. So I loved that aspect as well. So the thing I want to ask first is, I'm dying to know, like, what came first in creating this book? Was it a desire to do an epistolary novel, or was it the idea for this story and what would happen?
What came first was the idea, but I thought of it for TV because I've been working as a TV writer and coming up with my own ideas, and not actually getting very far with any of them because TV is quite difficult. So I'd had this idea, the core of the idea for this, but I was pretty not very hopeful of getting it out there, and it was suggested to me that I write a novel instead, simply as that was a better way to get that idea out, because you could be more in control of it than you can in TV. So it's on the spur of the moment, this decision. I'll handle this idea this way and not as a TV script. It happened just like that. I mean, I closed down my final draft software and opened up a Word document, and I set off. So that was how it started. So I didn't think a whole lot. Had I thought much, I might not have done it at all, or let alone this way, because I was then writing it for the next year, so I didn't know at all what I'd let myself in for.
Wow. I love that. Is such a cool, like, origin story, and to think of it, what it would have been like if it was in that TV format instead. And were you thinking, when you were thinking of it for TV, were you still thinking of it as something having to do a lot with like documentation and all these like messages between things, or was it more like we were going to see these things happen in real time?
It would have been a pretty not say standard, it wouldn't have been standard, but no, it would have been an ordinary TV drama, a drama where we look in to see who is right in this community and who is wrong. So that would have been what it was. It wasn't anything unusual at all, I don't think. Not that I got very far with the idea. But
that's so interesting. So then what made you feel, when you started to write it as a novel, what made you start to think, okay, I should write this via emails and text messages and all that, instead of like traditional chapters and all that kind of thing?
Well, while it was still in my mind that it could be for TV, I thought, well, I could write a novel that's just the emails sent by minor characters rather than the main characters. So that I had that vague thought in my head, and that's why we don't hear from three of the main characters in this in the whole story. And that's where that came from, because I thought, well, this will be the minor characters, this story. And we'll get the gossip and we'll eavesdrop on what they're talking about, and we'll find out what really happens in the novel. It would almost be like they would play into each other, this what was on TV and what was on stage, what was backstage.
Yeah.
So that was where that came from.
Oh,
All
wow.
completely left field.
I love that. So thinking of then where it started idea wise, even when you were thinking of it for TV, where did it come from to do this like small community based around this drama group, this theater group? Was it based off of something that you've been a part of, or that you know of, or was it just something that fascinated you, the possibilities of?
Well, they say write what you know. And I've been a member of a drama group since I was 14.
Oh, wow.
And I met my partner there. It's been a huge part of my life. I mean, the group folded in 2013. So obviously I haven't been a member of it for a long, long time. I haven't done any drama for ages. But for about 30 years, it's a huge part of my life. And all of my friends, even now, they're ex-members or former members of that group. So I was really familiar with how those groups work, how the dynamic is when you're putting on a play, what can happen, what can go wrong and what can go right. So that was what led me to set it there.
Awesome. So when you decided you were going to do this specific structure with the messages, were there any like epistolary novels that you looked at as a model, or did you just kind of just try to do it as organically to the story as you could?
I wasn't really thinking of any epistolary novels, but there was one novel in my mind, and that was Room.
Oh, wow.
Because that was told from the point of view of a 5-year-old. So I was thinking, when I sort of had an attack of nerves and thinking, do people really want to read sort of inarticulate people who are not articulate, or people who are not learned? I thought of Room, and I thought that's told from a 5-year-old's perspective. So yes, it is okay to carry on writing this novel. So that was in my mind quite a lot, even though it's not. You wouldn't put the two together as being similar. In my mind, they were.
Yeah, I totally get that, because the voice in Room, that boy has such a particular voice, and that's part of what attracts us to it, is that it doesn't sound like every book you've read. There's something very different about it in the specificity of feeling like you're hearing a very authentic voice. And that's something that I loved about this book too, that all the voice, because we get emails and messages from so many different characters in this book, but after a little while, it was kind of like, I mean, I still did read who it was to and who it was from, but it kind of became like I could block that out and still figure out who the voice was that was writing this email, just because it was so consistent and everybody had their own distinct voice. So I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about what that was like and how you went about creating those distinct voices, and so many of them.
Yeah. Well, I did pay an awful lot of attention to how characters introduced the email and how they signed off to each other character. So one character might be very chummy with another, and so they'll sign on and off in a particular way, but they may dislike another character and their email will have a completely different feel to it. So I paid a lot of attention going through the whole thing time and time again to get that right, because that would, I knew, help the reader. I didn't really want the reader to have to read all of that email header for every email. I wanted them to be able to sit back and let the story wash over them, as you might do with a regular novel. So I didn't want them to be interrupted. So if you know who's talking and who they're talking to with each email, then that was a good thing, as far as I could see.
Yeah. So when you set out to write this story, did you sort of plot out everything that was going to happen? And did you know what was going to happen? Or did you just start writing these messages between these characters and figure it out as you saw how they interacted with each other?
It was totally organic. I didn't plan a thing. And I'm not really the sort of writer that does. I don't have like a dry whiteboard. I don't have any Post-it notes much. I've got 3 Post-it notes for my 3rd novel that I've been working on, just the 3. So no, I'm a seat of my pants writer. So no, I didn't plan anything with this. I just let each character evolve. I let the story evolve, which possibly might explain why you don't know who has been murdered until quite far on in the story. So I like to get to the end of the first draft and then look back, because only then will I know what it's about. So I'll then reverse engineer. So I do my planning afterwards, if you like. That's the only way I can explain it, really.
Yeah, it's so fascinating to me, because I'm the complete opposite. I always talk about how I feel like I'm an obnoxious plotter, and that I plot so much to the point where like I have these like 40-page outlines, and but I've heard people talk about how it's really what we're doing, even though it sounds very different, like you going into it not really knowing, and me going into it knowing everything. We're kind of doing the same thing, because maybe what you're doing in that first draft is sort of like creating that loose outline for yourself that then you'll work from. And like, I just did that first and then have to work that in. So it always fascinates me how every author does it a very different way, but we all get to this same point at the end with a book that people can read. So
absolutely.
Yeah. So how did your background so you have background in journalism, editing, playwriting, screenwriting. I'm curious to know how that all influenced the way that you wrote this book, or did it not? Was this just like a completely different beast altogether? What would you say?
I think all of it plays in now, absolutely all of it, in different ways. because working as a journalist sort of gave me a respect for deadlines and word counts and brevity. Being an editor, well, not always that good. I mean, the first version of the appeal was 20,000 words longer, and then that had to be edited back. So I didn't realise at the time it had to be edited back, but at least I could do it when I knew it did. So that was very useful. I mean, playwriting and screenwriting were really useful because those two really prioritise dialogue for the writer. I mean, you do everything else too, but I mean, you've got other people impacting upon that story. You've got directors, you've got actors who will pick up the character and make it their own. You've got producers telling you what can and can't be done within budget. But with a novel, of course, you can go anywhere and do anything. It's just you. So that it was a new experience, but it's like everything I'd done before played into that in a really organic and a very positive sort of way. I had a lot of fun writing the novel. I didn't have a deadline because it was written on spec. It was wonderful. I felt really free, and as opposed to script writing, really, because there's a lot of constraints when you're writing for the screen that there aren't. You can go anywhere in a novel. You can do anything. Yeah. And no, it was brilliant. But yeah, everything I'd done before led up to it, I think.
Yeah, when I learned that you had this background in screenwriting and playwriting, I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense to me, because since this book pretty much is all each character's individual voice through their messages, and like I was saying, everybody sounds so distinct, it makes sense that you've had that training in, each character does have to have their own specific voice. And they do in any kind of traditional novel as well, but it's less completely in the foreground all the time, because there's usually like narration and other things like that going through. So yeah, thanks for talking about how all of that kind of wove together. So what I want to know, because to me, it was so fun to read all of the messages. It felt like I was like eavesdropping or like sneaking a peek at something I wasn't supposed to, which was really fun. And so I'm wondering, it's kind of a two-part question. What was the most challenging part about writing in this structure with all the messages? And what was the maybe biggest like unexpected joy of writing that way?
Oh, goodness. The unexpected joy was being able to write from every single character's point of view. I wasn't looking in or at any of the characters. I was actually that character. And that was quite a joy to do. And as I said, I had so much fun writing it. What was the challenge? Goodness, what's the most challenging? Well, that first version that I wrote, that was 100,000 words, and 20,000 had to go. But that 20,000 was all Izzy emailing Sam, which, if you've read the book, you'll know that Izzy emails Sam quite a lot. She's to the point of perhaps being rather obsessed. And poor Sam has a lot of emails to read. Well, in that first draft, she had a whole lot more. And that really was quite an immersive experience. Everyone reading it would know how Sam felt, because Izzy is very intense. And I suppose it was a challenge then to cut that back, because it was such a big part of that first draft. But I still had to keep that element of Izzy and Sam, that dynamic in their relationship. So that was quite a challenge. But I must say, otherwise, ignorance was bliss. I just enjoyed doing it. I didn't realise that other people didn't write novels like that. Nobody ever had, not for a long time. So I was perfectly happy writing these emails as I went along. But I'd recommend, if anyone out there is a writer and they're thinking of a story, I'd recommend it as an exercise to write letters between your characters. It's a really illuminating thing to do.
Yeah, I was just reading something. I can't remember. I have no idea who said it. It might have been Anne Lamott. It might have been in Bird by Bird, because I've been reading that recently. But they said, like, when you sort of get stuck, just have your character write a letter to somebody, and there's something sort of freeing in that it's not actually part of the book you're writing, probably, although in your case it would have been. But it still digs down deep into their core wants and beliefs and misbeliefs and all of that. And I thought that was an interesting trick. And I was like, going to tuck that into my back pocket for future use for sure. So another question I had, and maybe you secretly answered this just now, I wanted to know which character was the most fun to embody and who you had the most fun writing from. And maybe is it Izzy because you had so much of her?
Yeah, I guess so. Izzy is a kind of an exaggerated version of me, so I could really let go with all my inner demons and things and bring them out with her. I think possibly I was more like her when I was a bit younger. So yeah, it was lovely to write from Izzy's point of view. I loved also Jackie. There's a character called Jackie in there who's traveling around the world. So she sends these emails to people in the small community, and she has really no idea what's going on. She and she's very inappropriate with what she says. So she was very fun to work with as well. But they all were, I liked them all. I didn't think any of them were completely negative characters. I mean, I liked them all, even though some of them were terribly flawed.
Yeah.
I felt something for all of them, really.
Yeah, I mean, that's an important thing. Even if you're writing like a straight up villain, you have to be able to empathize with them in terms of understanding why they're doing what they're doing. Otherwise, it's just this sort of cartoonish sketch of somebody. And like you said, a lot of them are very deeply flawed, but it is clear how these things happen, how they kind of dig even deeper into their flaws and why they're doing the things that they're doing. But part of the fun of the book is figuring those things out and figuring just how flawed these people really are. Well, I want to talk about some other like just general writing process questions. But before I get to that, I'm curious what you hope that people will take from this book or think about because of this book, or certain themes that you really wanted to bring out in it.
Ooh. I think my main thought really is to entertain them for the time they're reading the book. That's the absolute main thing. And I think beyond that is kind of is a little bit extra, really. If that's what I would aim to do, just transport them while they're reading. So fingers crossed it does that.
Yeah.
There's plenty of themes in there. Things about charity and what people who do things for charity. And so we've had two of the characters have come home after volunteering overseas and literally giving their lives, practically giving 10 years of their life to being medics in war zones. So there's that, and then juxtaposed with this fundraising appeal. So yeah, that's something to think about, I think. And how we engage with other people. I think there's people in this community that don't have a great attitude to newcomers, and that's something that I think it's great if you can arrive in a new community and make friends with people. That's fab. But a lot of people don't have that kind of charisma, and getting into a new group of people, even if it's starting work at a new place, it's very, very difficult for a lot of people. So you have to embrace that newcomer and let them find their feet. But some people will not do that, and that happens in this particular community. So maybe that will give some people pause for thought when that newcomer arrives in their life.
Yeah, I also just one thing that I really loved in the book is you have what seems like a pretty quaint community. Like they're putting on plays, they all know each other. But it really highlights that even in something like that, even in this small, very like friendly community, there can be these pretty dark secrets and so much going on between the different characters under the surface. And I really love that. Like, you don't have to be, like, of course, but you don't have to be in a big city to have like big problems or big issues. Like, it's all just very human, small town stuff, but like it just explodes and explodes. So more general writing questions or process questions. I always like knowing this from authors. So I think as writers, we get a lot of ideas. I know that I always like like a thing will just jump through my head, and then I like write it down into a notes app, and then I'll look at it later and it'll just be like, a couple goes to a cabin and something happens. It's like, it's not an idea at all, actually. So I'm wondering, how do you know when you have an idea that can sort of go the distance and become an actual novel or a screenplay or a play or whatever it is you're working with at that time?
Ooh, I find ideas like that you just had there, they can percolate for 10 years, sometimes more. They're just literally ages. And you kind of add to them gradually over those years until the idea has grown quite considerably, and that suddenly starts looking like one that you might do next.
Mm-hmm.
So it's whenever, in any sort of point in time, I've got several ideas that are maturing in my mind, and sometimes in notes. I keep the occasional note about them. So yeah, I don't know how do you decide? It's like this X factor. At one moment, it's just an idea that's percolating, and the next, you set sail on it.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think writing a first chapter for an idea will give you a feel of how it's flowing, and whether it's the right time for you to start on that idea. Because I think you can start too early and run out of steam quite quickly. So yeah, I sort of play it by ear, but there's always a lot maturing and a lot going on.
Yeah, I like that idea that sometimes these ideas just need to take their time to ripen, and then you kind of feel like, okay, now it's the time for that story.
Ripen, I love that. The ripen. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I for me, I feel like it's always, once I have a premise that I'm interested in or a question I'm interested in, and can pair that with something that I either believe really passionately or that I want to explore or that I want to talk about, then I feel like, okay, now that can go and do the whole thing, because that it won't be the premise so much that like fuels me the whole time. It'll be that thing that I want to talk or explore. But yeah, I'm always so interested in that, and in how I was doing a panel, and Wendy Walker was talking about when she knows, when she says, at this point, I have a very good sense of when an idea is going to go the distance. And she had this whole thing. And so yeah, I love hearing about that. Do you have any specific writing routines? Like, is there a certain time of day you have to write? Do you have to like light a special candle or what do you do to kind of get it?
I do. I write intensely in the morning, and sometimes I go swimming. Sometimes I don't. If I don't go swimming, I start at 7:30 in the morning. If I do go swimming, I start at 8:30, and I'll write until between 12 and 1, really intensely. I mean, like, I don't do very much on social media at that time. I will go all out to write. Then I'll stop for lunch, and then after lunch, I'll do a lot more lighter stuff. I might read what I wrote in the morning, or the things you end up having to do, answer emails, do other various bits and bobs in the afternoon when I'm not quite as focused as I am in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
And then if I have a deadline I have to hit, I might do a bit more intense work from between 4 and 7. But ideally, I won't do that because I'm winding down in the evening, ready to start again the following morning. So yeah, my routine is really quite fierce, and I do have to feel quite calm, I think, to write. If there's something bothering me or something awful happening in my life, at various times when that has been the case, I haven't been able to write at all. So unlike some writers are motivated by that, they'll use the writing as the escape from the awful thing that's happening in their life. I'm not like that. I have to feel quite calm and chilled, and everything's fine with the world. Now I can write.
Yeah, I'm exactly the same way. If I'm in some kind of heightened emotional state, I just can't do it. It's too much. But actually, and I don't know, I'll toss this question back to you. When the pandemic first hit, like for me, like I'm a very anxious person. And so that was really fueling my anxiety, of course. But for me, that was the one time where going into the book that I was writing, which was actually incredibly dark, was sort of, I could do it and wanted to do it because the darkness of that book was so different from the darkness that was in the world at the time, that it was like kind of more lighthearted in a way somehow, even though there's serial killer and murders galore. So how did the pandemic affect your writing life, if it did at all?
Yeah, well, when it hit the first time in 2020, I was in the middle of the Twyford Code, my second novel, and really for me, it really fueled me. I really liked the focus, and there was nowhere else to go, so I could just write more. And so it worked really well for that, I have to say. I know it wasn't a great time, but as in for focus for my writing, it was great. So the pandemic for me wasn't so bad for that one.
Yeah, I felt the same way because I was teaching at the time, and so my job went virtual in that first year, and so suddenly I didn't have to drive to work, and I had this extra time for writing, and it was like, okay, this is terrible, but also it's kind of working out for me in this one aspect of my life, which we need all those silver linings that we can get when something so terrible like that is happening. So what authors or maybe specific books have inspired your writing over the years?
Oh, I've already said Room, so we've got that one. I mean, Agatha Christie, of course. I always cite a writer, he's not a novelist, Tony Parker, who wrote oral histories. He was like, his American equivalent was Studs Terkel. Going back years. Most of their books I don't think are even available now, so good luck finding them. But both of them recorded people talking, usually people from very marginalised communities who people had never heard from before. They would record them talking and then just put on the page their words. So it's extraordinary to read, really. And that has been very influential, I think, in how I present characters on the page. So Tony Parker, definitely. I love the Victorian novelists. They've been quite influential. Thomas Hardy, the Brontes, Dickens. I love Thomas Hardy. His work is so dark as well, and it's brilliant. That's about it. I'm not really aware of influences while I'm writing. I think it's afterwards when you look back and you think, oh yeah, that's I was influenced by that.
So if you, I think this, maybe you have an easy answer, but I think this is a hard question. If you had to pick one book that was the only book that you were allowed to read for the rest of your life, what would that book be?
That is such a hard question.
It's like an evil question.
It's evil. It's totally evil. I think it would have to be Don Quixote.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's quite a big book. So if I only had one book, it would need to be quite big.
Yeah.
Don Quixote. And it's great as well. It's a wonderful read.
It's kind of got everything that you need in a book. So
it's also very funny. It's a very funny book.
Yeah. So when did you? I know you've done various different types of writing in your life, but when did you kind of start writing? Did you write as a little kid? Did you pick it up in college or something? And how has your writing sort of evolved over time? Like I said, I know you've done these various kinds, but were you always in mind that you wanted to be doing creative writing of some kind?
Yeah, I loved writing from the minute I learned how to do it. When you're about 5 or 6 and they teach you how to put words together into little sections, that was it. I thought this is how I communicate with the world. This is how I will have my voice heard, I suppose, because I was quite a shy child as I grew up to be quite a shy adult. But that was always how I could reach people, by writing, and people always wanted to either read it or listen to it. So, and that fueled that. What's the second part of your question?
How writing has sort of evolved over time
for me. I first of all, I did an English degree. Now I did that because I thought I'd be writing during that English degree. As it turns out, you tend to read more than you write. And this is many years before they started to do creative writing degrees, certainly in UK universities. That would have been me. I would have done creative writing, definitely. But I had to do English literature. And then I went on to journalism for the same reason, just so that I could be writing every day. I was never a news hound. I never had, a great interest in putting together newspapers or magazines. It was just writing. And that turned out to be pretty good, because if you work on a monthly magazine, you're getting your work out to people every single month. It's getting in front of people. And that was quite fulfilling for a number of years for me. But eventually it wasn't, as most, careers. And I burned out of that and decided it was time that I needed to try and become a writer in my own right. It was then or never. So, so I have evolved in my relationship with it. Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. So we're almost time to have some audience questions, but I want to make sure to ask you, because I know your second book, The Twyford Code, just came out in the UK, and it's going to come out probably around this time next year in the US. So can you tell us a little bit about that so we know what to look forward to?
Yes. The Twyford Code is about a former prisoner who is asked by his probation officer to fill his time while he's trying to go straight, having come out of prison from a very long sentence. She suggests that he revisits a traumatic event in his youth, and he remembers his teacher confiscated a book from him, a book he'd found on a bus, and she became obsessed with something about this book, took the class on a school trip, and disappeared. Now, the main character, Steve, can't remember a great deal about that time. He knows it was traumatic, but he's forgotten. So he goes back to speak to his school friends to find out what they remember, and is launched into an adventure into his own life, as well as what happened to Miss Isles, as she was apparently obsessed with a children's author who she thought had put codes in her books. There's the Twyford Code and Edith Twyford. So Steve investigates that and tries to find out whether she was right. I can't say any more.
Yeah, that sounds great. I cannot wait to read it. Is that structurally kind of more traditional in the sense of a novel, or does it have its own thing too?
It's told through audio files, because
awesome.
Steve can't read or write, so he's had to voice record his investigation. And what we're reading is the automatic transcriptions of what has been found of his investigation.
I love it. I can't wait. Okay, Stephanie.
I'm already like sad that now we have to wait like a whole year to experience that book. Although I shouldn't say this, but listen, y'all, some places in the UK do ship. Ship to the US, I should say. This has been such a fun conversation to listen to. I have so many notes written down of different things that I was like in the background in my office laughing about as you guys were talking. So thank you so much. We have lots of questions. So the first one that I want to bring up is that, and this is kind of a question that you like spoke to a little bit, of your experience in a drama group. I believe you said you had like 30 years of experience in that group. And that was something that came up for sure as people were reading this in our bookseller, because they wanted to know the drama that's created in the theater group. Is that like, they were like, did she have a bad experience in a theater group? Or like, what was it? Like, where did that, just talk a little bit about that. I guess it's really what they wanted to get to, to kind of make that where the drama all happened.
Well, if you are a member of a drama group, you think about what you're doing. It's a bunch of people who get together and they rehearse over weeks and months, for one evening, perhaps 2 or 3 evenings, but for just one play. And it all builds and builds and builds to that maybe one night, maybe 2 or 3 nights. And the tension and the stakes that are so high with that. And although everybody is friends, it's like being in a very tight-knit workplace or a tight-knit family. The stakes are so high, and emotions can run wild while you're doing that. But when you bring it all together and present that play in front of an audience, something magic happens as well. So it's wonderful. It's a brilliant hobby, but it's also very all-consuming and passions are risen all the time. So it's fabulous. And I wanted to kind of do that. I wanted this to be a tribute to amateur drama, as well as exposing some of the funnier sides to it. But there's nothing like it. There's no hobby like doing that.
I will not spotlight anyone's specific stories, but I will tell you, we have lots of booksellers and people on staff who were also part of drama theater groups. And so it did lead to some great stories that I had not heard from my coworkers, at least, of their time in community theater, or current time in community theater in the case of some. So definitely. Megan, were you ever involved in drama or a theater group?
I went to one meeting of drama club in high school, and that was it. And I don't think it was because I stopped going. I think it just sort of petered out.
Okay.
I'm very interested in it though, and I like theater. And actually, that was one of the reasons why I loved this book so much, was because it gave me a window into that world that I haven't really been a part of.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I have not been a part of one, and so that's where it was like so funny to see the difference between those of us who were reading it and haven't been a part of one, and those of us who were reading it and have been a part of one, and looking at our faces of like, yeah, y'all know nothing. It's very funny. Oh yes, and we have Nancy Willard, who is one of our book club members. Hi, Nancy. Saying, I don't know if you guys have either of you has read "If We Were Villains" by M.L. Rio, but she's saying it makes her think of that a little bit too.
Oh.
Janice, I think you would relate.
Yeah.
I would put that on the list. Yeah, that's one to write down. Okay, next question came from Katie, and Katie is wondering, were there very different experiences getting published in the UK versus getting published in the US?
I'm not sure, because my agent deals with both sides. So that you can't, as an author, you're kind of divorced from that, and I didn't have to worry about it. And I was quite lucky anyway, because having been a screenwriter, I already had an agent who worked in an agency that also represented novelists. So that was a fairly smooth transition between the two. Although it was, I found it, it's a whole other story trying to get an agent as a screenwriter, maybe for another day. But yeah, that was very tricky. But it was fine. US, UK, it's great. It's been wonderful to work with both.
Yeah, I mean, because I guess, did you find out that you were getting published in the UK and then there was like a break before, or did you know from the beginning that it would be in both?
No, it was a break. Hence, there's a year difference between the two. Yeah, it was wonderful when I learned I would.
Which, and maybe this goes hand in hand with that. And I should have brought my example to show, but as many people might know, the UK, it's not always the same cover. Sometimes it's the same cover between the US and the UK, and sometimes they're different covers. So this, in case anyone joined us after I showed it earlier, this is the US cover of The Appeal. What was it like to see the two different covers and two different reveals of like how your book was being interpreted and then marketed?
Oh, it was wonderful. I love that each has pulled out a different aspect of the story and put it on the cover. In the UK, our cover is quite cozy, and it's an illustration, a very cute village with a few blood spatters here and there. And it's in the US, very dark and misty and intriguing and atmospheric. And I think The Appeal has both of those elements. So it's like I've got both sides of the coin. When I put the two together, it's fantastic.
Yeah, it was so fun to see, because I had seen the UK one first, like I said, and then I saw this one and I was like, wait, is this the same book? Like, we're going with I loved, but it gives you a really full package, like you said, of like what you're getting inside of it when you kind of get to combine both of them. Going back to community theater, and it's okay if this is putting you on the spot. It's okay if you don't want to be put on the spot, is what I'm trying to say. Not okay if we're putting you on the spot. very early on, so this is not a spoiler for people because we did have people, I promised everyone, I forgot to tell everyone that at the beginning, but y'all knew the rules. We had so many people who were concerned about having a spoiler conversation. We were like, we promise we will be on our best behavior. We will not spoil anything. So this is very early on, as they're, you're getting associated with a community theater. They were just finishing up Life Spirit. They're getting ready to do All My Sons. And it's the announcement, the email that is announcing to all the current members that that's what they're switching to. And it says, please bear in mind, you will need to perfect your American accents for this one. We love a challenge, which was so fun to read that as an American. So the question is, Janice, have you ever perfected your American accent?
No, I haven't. Luckily. No, we did All My Sons. We did All My Sons, and the actors in it had to perfect their American accents. But luckily, I wasn't in it. So I didn't have to. Lucky. So if you were hoping to hear me talk with an American accent this evening, no.
Not happening. Don't worry, Megan can talk in the American accent for you. Megan's all over it.
I'm secretly British, and I've just been playing along the whole time.
Okay, next question. And I was so glad that, Megan, you asked the question of authors who inspired your writing, Janice. And you said Agatha Christie, of course. And I don't know if you know, but or maybe just I don't know if you know off the top of your head, but the for everyone else reading or watching, on the cover of the appeal, underneath where it says international bestseller in all caps, it says a dazzling, clever, modern Agatha Christie. And that's a quote from the Sunday Times. So what is that like as a mystery writer who has looked up to Agatha Christie or been inspired by her writings in some way to receive that kind of compliment?
Oh, it was amazing. I couldn't believe it. And I only hope that she's not turning in her grave every time that phrase is used. I'm sorry, Agatha. No, that it's wonderful. I mean, it's not for me to say whether it's true or not, but it's lovely to hear people say that because you can't get a higher accolade, really, not in this world.
Mm-mm.
I think Megan and I can vouch that you definitely deserve that accolade.
Yes.
We were all talking about, and Megan, I love that this is one of your earlier questions too, but just to come back to how you were able to keep track of this cast of characters and also enable the reader to keep track of them, because we were like, I feel like sometimes it's very, as an author, you probably spend so much time with them that every author probably feels like they know so much about their characters by the time it's done and finished. And, you could have as many as you want because you know exactly what each one is thinking. As the reader, I feel like that is very hard to translate to us being as just opening up, but immediately, I mean, again, within the first 5 pages, I know exactly who Izzy is. Or at least like how she's presenting, So just like, I think that feels very Agatha Christie to me, that I feel like I know these characters so deeply. So yeah, I think you definitely deserve that compliment.
Oh, thank you.
And you had earlier said to Megan that I believe it was like 20,000 words were cut from the first draft.
Yeah.
Is there anything that was edited out that you like still think about today that you're kind of like, I wish that was in there?
No, not at all. And I think this comes from being a journalist. Because I don't know if anyone has ever, that's watching this has ever worked as a journalist. You have this thing where you can learn, everything about something while you're writing about it. And as soon as that issue's gone, as soon as you've finished, you forget it all and it's gone. So I actually can't remember, over and above this being mainly Izzy and Sam emails, what was in that 20,000. It's like you pull the chain and it's gone out of your head. So that's another way how being a journalist helps being an author, because I don't dwell on what's gone ever. I don't even remember it. It's bliss.
It sounds blissful. Megan, is that the same experience that you have, or do you go back and think about things that were edited out of any of your books?
I think there's only because I definitely tend to overwrite in my first drafts, and I always have to pull them back. And I had a similar experience for my debut, The Winter Sister. before we even shopped it to editors, my agent was like, this is 135,000 words. You need to get that under 100,000. And I was like, that's a quarter of the book. I don't know how to do that. But what I find is like really those cuts, a lot of times it's not necessarily taking full scenes. It's just paring scenes down and taking out the words that those little words here and there. And it's crazy how these nips and tucks everywhere can really add up to a lot of things. So in that respect, I don't think there's been something that I've really missed. There's only one paragraph that I had to remove from my most recent book, The Family Plot, which has a lot of true crime references in it because it's about this true crime obsessed family. And there was one reference that I really, really liked. And my editor was like, this is, or our editor, we have the same US editor, was like, this isn't doing anything for the, like, you just need to take this out. And I was like, I know you're right, but I just wanted to talk about that.
But I just wanted it in there. Can't I just leave it? That's I always like hearing about that process that, you know, we kind of get glimpses into what happens behind the scenes between you all and your editors. And like, everyone's always so complimentary of how editors are so crucial to this kind of final piece that we get to witness. But it's fun to hear like what happens behind the scenes. Other question that came up, Janice, is, and I'm wondering if this kind of goes back to your experience as a journalist and some other things that you did before writing this book. Did you have to do any, I know you said you don't do a lot of planning. Did you have to do any research for this, or was it all drawn upon knowledge that you kind of already had?
I did do some research because you'll notice it's written at a particular time. It's, I think, around 6 months in 2018. What I remember doing a lot of research into what was happening in Africa, because without giving too much away, there is a character in Africa. So I had to know what was going on there. So I would subscribe to things like, I think it was Africa Today, and forgive me if that's the wrong title. So I knew what to do with that character and what they could be talking about. So I certainly did that. Can't think of any more specific research. Probably did. Oh, I had to do a bit of health research as well. There's the health campaign. I'm a bit of a hypochondriac, so there was some I knew anyway.
I am as well. Maybe it's a writer thing.
Maybe, you may well be. I think you're right, Megan. Yeah, there's a bit that wasn't too much research, really. I mean, it was doable.
Yeah, that sounds so. I recently learned that at least in an interview that we did earlier this week, both authors were like, that's my least favorite part of writing is the research process. So I'm glad maybe that was good that you didn't have to do a ton. Megan, how do you feel about research? And they were talking about kind of similar mystery thrillers, like particularly around like police procedurals and things like that. Cause they were like, I also know I'm inevitably probably going to get it wrong. And someone's going to tell me that I got that detail wrong, even though I tried really hard to get it right.
Yeah, I feel the same way about the police procedure stuff. And also the book that I've been working on most recently has like a medical thing at the center of it. And so I was talking to my friend who's a surgeon and he was telling me all these things and I'm writing them all down. But then when it came time to but you can't put all those things into the book because the average reader doesn't know those things. So I'm like, I hope that this is what you said. Like, I think so. We'll see if I get emails.
Yeah. Yes, that is. And I'm like, I don't know the difference. I'm not somebody that would know. So I'm like, you can tell me anything. I believe it.
I always say that I think every writer should have a doctor friend, a police friend, and a lawyer friend to help them with all those questions. And I don't have a police friend or a lawyer friend, but I wish I did.
Well, everyone now heard. Megan needs looking to fill those positions. Application. Okay, well, with our last 5 minutes, we end many of our interviews with this or that. So I will give you both two things. The only rule is you can't choose both, but you are allowed to substitute your own answer if neither of those things is for you. So we in the Midwest today woke up with just a little bit of snow. I found that shocking. I didn't know that we were supposed to get a little bit of snow. It didn't derail anything, thankfully. But so these are all winter themed in that spirit of it being very cold and wintry. So the first question is, are you somebody who would prefer to take a walk in the snow or ice skate?
Walk in the snow.
Yeah, walk in the snow. Ice skate, I'd probably die.
Yeah.
My mind goes straight there. Like, that's not a good move for me.
If I'm ice skating, I for sure need those little I don't know what they call it, but the bouncer that they give you where you can't fall. Because I know not to fall, but on my wrist, but it's inevitable. I'll fall and break my wrist. Not surprising. Sorry, ice skating. I think. Are you somebody who would prefer to have a nice warm afternoon tea or a warm cup of soup?
For me, afternoon tea.
Any particular kind, Janice?
English breakfast.
Classic.
Classic.
I think I'm going to go with soup because I'm like always hungry, always thinking about food. So
do you have a favorite winter soup, Megan?
We just made one recently that was this Parmesan chickpea soup. That was really good. And it's from the blogger How Sweet Eats. So if anybody thinks that,
I was going to be like, I'll get that note from you afterwards. Yes, I'm all in to try that soup. Are you, although I might already know the answer to this based off of our earlier question, but are you a snow sport, like maybe skiing, tubing, snowboarding person? Or are you like, I will be at the bottom of the hill by the fire reading my book person?
Bottom of the hill by the fire reading a book all the time.
Janice, you seem very confident in that answer.
I know the answer to that question.
Yeah, don't even need to think about that. The one time that I tried skiing, I started to slide down toward a tree, and then I was like, nope, you guys go. I'm going to sit on this stump for 2 hours, and that's fine.
Did you really sit for 2 hours and wait for
I really did. I was kind of hoping that they would like take pity on me and be like, we'll stop now. But they liked it. They were having fun. I went with the wrong group. Yeah. I think there should be like a bulletin at like ski resorts or like those ski lodges for the like group of people that just want to meet up with each other and discuss books. They've been brought along and they've realized they've made a grave mistake. Yeah. Not for them. Okay, final question, which is the perfect follow-up to you both being fireside readers. Is your ideal winter read a like cozy, winter-themed, cold read, or warm escapist, like you want to be totally removed and unreminded from the cold around you?
Warm and escapist.
Ooh.
I think I dig down into the I don't know if I would call them cozy, but I really love reading thrillers anytime, but I love reading thrillers in the winter because it's like I'm already inside and I'm like, I don't know, there's something about like you're safe because you're inside, and I don't know, I just love it. But I also love thrillers in the summer and anytime.
Thrillers all year round.
Yeah.
Yes, that makes complete sense. I go back and forth. So this has been a very divisive this or that for our own staff about like what you do you each have a recommendation of like one, like Janice, do you have a favorite like escapist warm read?
Not off the top of my head. I'd have to go and look at my bookshelf.
A lot of pressure. Yes, take your time. Megan, do you have one for your like cozy thriller, not cozy, but thriller winter
Well,
vibe?
I think this might qualify as sort of a bridge between those two things because I recently read Reckless Girls by Rachel Hawkins. And, it's got a very warm escapist setting. just very dark things happen. So it's good for both of those.
Another shout out to Agatha Christie.
Yes.
Inspired. Yeah. Janice, did you discover something on your bookshelf?
I did. The Maid by Nita Prose just come out. I thought, yeah, that's really, although it's a thriller and it is a whodunit, it's also really escapist because it's like a kind of stylized world. It's great. Yes. You could lose yourself in that.
That's when I think that had the same like UK and US release, and we've definitely received lots of excitement about The Maid. Well, thank you both so much for this incredible conversation. This was so fun to hear. I said this in the background, but it's really one of the plus sides, silver linings. We were talking about those a little bit earlier too, right? Of virtual events is seeing authors in conversation with each other, because I think it leads to some of these incredible questions that we wouldn't get to hear otherwise. And so it's awesome that we get to connect, even though we're all in different time zones, in different countries. So thank you both so much. Anything either of you wants to say before we sign off today?
Well, thank you. And thanks, Janice, for letting me be the one to ask you these questions.
Oh, thank you.
It was such a thrill.
Thank you for asking the questions, and thank you, Stephanie, for hosting. Thank you both.
Yes, thank you. Oh, one thing to tell the audience before we sign off, because I forgot to say this at the beginning, Janice was kind enough to sign lots of book plates for us. So also, if you have been watching this but have not yet ordered your own copy of The Appeal, we have plenty of them. We are fully stocked because we refuse to not be selling this book like crazy. And if you, I'll give our online link here, but also we have lots of signed book plates to accompany these, which is really fun. Janice, we were complimenting your handwriting. We were like, how did she manage to do so many of these? And they're so neat and obvious, like who it is. We very much value them. So thank you for doing that. And thank you to everyone for considering and for watching today. So have a great rest of your afternoon and a great rest of your evening for you, Janice.
Thank you.
We'll see everyone next time.
Bye.